Ever wondered what ancient Romans ate for breakfast, lunch, or dinner? How about their strange taste for things like peacock tongues and flamingo brains? Let's go back in time, peek into their kitchens, and explore their food. We'll discover how they cooked, what weird foods they enjoyed, and their unique dining customs. From the fancy meals of the rich to the simple eats of the poor, we're diving deep into the yummy world of Roman food. In this video, we are looking at the Roman cuisine from exotic delicacies to everyday staples. Ready to join? Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you always get notified. Exotic delicacies. Beyond the daily meals of bread, cheese, and vegetables, Romans had a taste for the exotic. These weren't your everyday dishes, but delicacies savored by the wealthy and adventurous. Imagine feasting on peacock tongues or dormice. For some Romans, the rarer the food, the better. Flamingo brains, sea urchins, snails. These were all considered delicacies. The kitchens of rich Romans saw an array of imported spices, adding flavor and status to their meals. These exotic foods weren't just about taste. They were a symbol of luxury, a show of wealth and sophistication. For those who could afford such extravagance, these meals were a way to impress. Yet for others, these foods were met with curiosity, even disgust. For the common Roman, such indulgence was unimaginable. In contrast, foreigners visiting Rome might be baffled or intrigued by these culinary choices. What one culture saw as a delicacy, another might view with suspicion or bemusement. In the grand scheme of Rome's diverse population, food could be as divisive as it was unifying. Cooking methods. How Romans prepared their food was as diverse as their ingredients. Boiling, roasting, frying, baking, grilling, smoking. Romans had their methods to bring out the best in their meals. The choice of cooking method depended on the food, the available fuel, the cooking equipment, and the desired taste or texture. The wealthy Romans with their elaborate kitchens and variety of equipment had a broader range of methods at their disposal. Their meals were not only about the ingredients, but also about how they were prepared. The poor Romans, on the other hand, had less choice. Their methods were often simpler, driven by necessity rather than culinary experimentation. Similarly, the differences in cooking methods were also apparent between the urban Romans with easy access to fuel and equipment and the rural Romans, who might have to rely more on open-fire cooking. Foreigners with their own unique food cultures might find Roman cooking methods unfamiliar, leading to an interesting fusion of culinary styles. Eating habits. Eating was not just about food in Rome. It was an event, a spectacle complete with its rituals and etiquette. Romans would often recline on couches while eating, using utensils, plates, and cups to consume their meals. Napkins, tablecloths, and finger bowls were part of the dining experience, especially for the upper class. There were also religious aspects. Prayers might be said, sacrifices offered. Meals could be social events with conversation, music, and entertainment. However, these practices varied widely across different social groups. The poor Romans had fewer luxuries, and their meals were often simpler affairs. For rural Romans, meals might also be times for community, with food often shared amongst neighbors. Foreigners might bring their own eating habits to the table, adding to the cultural mix. In all these variations, the Roman dining experience was a window into their diverse society, offering insights into their culture, their values, and their way of life. Breakfast, or ientaculum. Welcome to a morning in ancient Rome, where the sun rises over a bustling city full of different people, each one starting their day in their own way, but with a common ritual, breakfast, or as they called it, ientaculum. This wasn't a lavish feast or a grand meal. No, it was a quick and simple meal to kickstart the day. Imagine a Roman morning with the smell of fresh wheat bread in the air. This bread wasn't just food, it was a tradition, a staple of every Roman breakfast. Sometimes, to spice things up a little, they would dip this bread in wine. Yes, wine for breakfast. But let's not forget the sweet-toothed Romans who would start their day with a drizzle of honey on their bread. This honey wasn't ordinary honey, it was fresh, straight from the countryside hives. That wasn't all that was on the menu. Boiled eggs, fresh milk straight from the cow, apples with their crisp bite, sweet and succulent figs, and juicy grapes. These were all part of the Roman breakfast. For those who fancied a bit of the grape, they'd even sip on some watered-down wine. But remember, for the Romans, breakfast wasn't about a big feast. It was more about getting the right start to a busy day ahead. Of course, not everyone ate the same thing for breakfast. If you were a city worker or a country farmer, your mornings were likely rushed. You had work to do, fields to tend to, markets to open, Breakfast for you would probably be a quick bite. You might have some leftovers from dinner the night before, or just some dry bread and a piece of cheese. If you were lucky, you'd have some olives to go with it. Meanwhile, in the grand villas of rich Romans, breakfast was a bit more leisurely. With more time and resources, they had a wider spread, a range of cheeses from across the empire, the finest honey, an assortment of fruits and nuts. These were often part of their morning meal. They even had the luxury of different kinds of eggs, not just from chickens, but from various birds. The bread they ate was also superior, often sweetened for an added touch of indulgence. Let's not leave out the Roman soldiers. Their breakfast had to fuel them for the hard day ahead. They didn't have time for fancy cheeses or sweetbread. They needed something hearty and filling. They had pulse, a sort of porridge made from wheat or barley. This was their power food, ready to keep them strong and energetic. Lunch, or prandium. As the Roman morning wore on, the sun climbing higher in the azure sky, it was time for the next meal of the day. The lunch, or prandium, as it was known to the Romans. Much like breakfast, lunch was no elaborate affair. It was often simple and informal, grabbed on the go or consumed during a short work break. Picture this: Roman lunch. More bread, still warm and fragrant. Maybe some cheese again. There were olives too, adding a tangy bite to the meal. Salads were common, made with fresh vegetables from the market. If you were lucky, you might have some meat or fish, but these were usually reserved for dinner. Fruits were a common sight, providing a sweet ending to the meal. And yes, there was wine too, because what's a Roman meal without a sip of wine, right? Now, just like breakfast, what you had for lunch depended a lot on who you were and where you lived. The busy city worker or the hard-working country farmer probably had a quick lunch. There were fields to plow, goods to sell, tasks to complete. Their lunch might consist of a piece of bread, some cheese, a handful of olives, and perhaps a quick salad. On the other end of the scale, the rich Romans living in their grand houses had more options. Their lunch might be more varied, with an assortment of cheeses, a colorful salad with fresh vegetables, maybe even some meat or fish. They would have more fruits to choose from, and their wine would be of the best quality. And what about the Roman soldiers? Their lunch, much like their breakfast, was hearty and filling. No time for salads or a variety of cheeses. They needed something that would keep them going. So their lunch might consist of more pulse, the wheat or barley porridge, and some bread and cheese. A simple meal, but one that was fuel for their tough tasks. Dinner, or cena. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the city of Rome bathed in the warm glow of twilight, the time arrived for the main event of the day, gastronomically speaking. Dinner, or cena as it was known, was when the Romans truly embraced their culinary spirit. This was the meal that was varied and elaborate, a time to sit down, relax, and savor the flavors of Roman cuisine. Let's explore a Roman dinner. The staples. Bread and cheese were present, of course, but there was so much more. Soup, perhaps a lentil one, started the meal. A variety of vegetables followed, providing a fresh crunch. Then came the proteins. Meat, fish, poultry, and game were all on the menu. Even shellfish made an appearance. Eggs, a versatile food, could be cooked in numerous ways. And let's not forget the sweet treats. Pastries, usually sweetened with honey, provided a delightful end to the meal. Fresh fruit and a variety of nuts were also enjoyed as desserts. And to wash it all down, wine, the companion to any Roman meal, was generously poured. Yet not all Romans dined the same way. For the city worker or the rural farmer, cena might not be as elaborate. After a long day, their meal would likely consist of some soup, bread, cheese, vegetables, and if available, a bit of meat or fish. A simple fruit like an apple might complete their meal. In contrast, though wealthy Romans feasted, their cena could be a grand event, particularly on special occasions. Exotic meats, game, an assortment of shellfish, a variety of vegetables, and the finest of wines would grace their tables. They would round off their meal with gourmet pastries, an array of fruits, and the choicest of nuts. And our Roman soldiers? Well, their cena, while simpler than that of the wealthy, was still substantial. More of the filling pulse, bread, cheese, and perhaps some meat if they were lucky. Their meal was designed to provide them with the energy they needed for their demanding lives. Hope you enjoyed this tasty trip to ancient Rome. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing journeys. What surprised you most about Roman food? Share your thoughts in the comments below.